Hi everyone. Thanks for coming back to the Frugal Kitchen. We really appreciate you here. So this recipe is pizza, but like a snack pizza. I was craving pizza at some point, and I had pepperoni and I had jalapenos, and so I was gonna make a pizza with that, but I didn't want to make dinner pizza. I wanted to make some kind of snacky thing. So I looked on Pinterest for a while and found from sallysbakingaddiction.com a recipe for pizza pull-apart rolls, but it's exactly the same thing as monkey bread. So I'm calling it pizza monkey bread. And this recipe does involve making the bread with yeast and everything yourself. So start off with a pack of yeast, then do 1 tablespoon of sugar, and then 3/4 cup of milk, which I am making from powdered milk. So this is not vegan. You will see the card at the beginning mentioned vegan cheese. I did use vegan cheese in this because I had it lying around. I think you can follow the recipe for this if you have a vegan bread recipe already. I don't have one, but if you look at my sandwich bread recipe, I think if you just omit, I don't even know if there's milk in that. I guess there is. Um, the milk shouldn't be a problem. I think if you omit the honey and add molasses, you might be able to get, and obviously a milk substitute, you might be able to get vegan bread out of that. Let the yeast eat the sugar for 5 minutes. I think actually the recipe says 5 to 10 minutes, and it looked like 5 minutes was sufficient. And then I added 3 tablespoons of butter that were melted ahead of time. And it looks like also 1 egg is coming up. So this recipe, if you either have a vegan bread recipe, totally use that. I don't think the bread was all that special, except for some spices that come later. 1 teaspoon of salt added to the bowl. Here comes the fancy seasoning. 1 teaspoon of garlic powder. And then there's also going to be a teaspoon of Italian seasoning blend, or I don't have that, so I just did 1 teaspoon of oregano. The spices did help make this taste more like pizza instead of just some old bread. A lot of recipes I found when I was trying to find a good recipe for this involved pre-made dough, like crescent rolls or something. I didn't want to do that because I wanted to use whole wheat flour and have something a little healthier. So we're going to be adding a cup of flour right now. It's 2 3/4 cups total, but just a cup right now. So if you know of a quick dough, and that's not the way I should say it because that sounds like a quick bread recipe, but a pre-made dough, just grab that, roll the stuff in, and you've got a very easy, like 4 ingredient recipe. Or, your favorite vegan dough recipe. For me, the only reason I eat vegan sometimes is for avoiding cholesterol. So this recipe doesn't avoid cholesterol because I have a bunch of pepperoni in it, but I was craving pepperoni, so we bought some and we put some on pizza, and then I didn't know what else to do with it. So I guess I decided to make more pizza. I don't know what that was all about. So I went ahead and stirred this a bit, add the rest of the flour. So 1 3/4 cups is the next batch. I don't know why they want you to just put a little bit of dough in the first time around and stir it, just to incorporate the ingredients, and then add the rest of the flour. So at this point, once you add all the flour, you're basically done with the dough part of it. You just need to let it rise, obviously. a couple times. But that's the entire dough ingredient list. And that's really the only thing that's, I don't even want to say difficult, but that's the only thing that uses your brain. Pizza, aside from that, is throw a bunch of stuff that tastes good together, make sure cheese is involved, and you have a pizza. So now I'm kneading the dough, and despite what cartoons may have told you, it's not just rolling a bunch of dough out or smacking it with your knuckles. There's a method of pushing and rotating that you'll see here. I'm folding it in half, pushing it, rotating it 90 degrees, and then continuing. You may see little bits of stuff in the dough. That's the oregano. Don't be scared. It's not like bugs on my counter or anything like that. So then we're just going to keep doing this for a while until it's time to let it rise. Oh, that was a skin of garlic. So this is the cheese I'm using. This is the pepperoni, and there are also jalapenos on the counter. I do a lot of vegan recipes, and I'm sorry that this one isn't vegan. I am not personally vegan, but I am a lot more vegan than I used to be. I don't know if you grew up in a time, let's just say like the last millennium, where your parents kind of like insisted you have a meat and two sides with every meal. It could just be me. That was my father's biggest thing. That was not a Freudian slip. I said my husband because I just thought about him. He always makes fun of me for having a meat and two sides, or at least he did back when I ate that way. Because he thinks dinner is just cooking up some chicken and just having that on a plate, and that's not dinner, people. Come on. You have to have something that's not a meat involved, and a lot of dinner doesn't have to involve meat, but if it has meat, you really need something else, right? It can't just be me. So anyway, this is, so the recipe said to slice into quarters the pepperoni. It also said to use half a cup of pepperoni, and that for the inside, and then a quarter cup for the top of it. So what's that? 3/4 cups, and I'm pretty sure I have more than a cup of pepperoni. I think with pizza, one of the reasons that everybody loves it and that it's easy to make is because after you make the dough, and maybe I would even say just to make sure you don't have not enough or too much sauce and cheese. It doesn't matter. Like the toppings don't matter what they are or how much you have. So I don't care recipe. You said I needed less pepperoni, but I said I needed more pepperoni. And the jalapenos are not in this recipe, but I just grabbed a handful-ish and chopped them up into small pieces. And then I took all of that cheese. That's probably 5 or 6 slices. I do know that I used some of this in a different recipe recently. Switching bowls because it turns out I had too small of a bowl. And then I'm crumbling the cheese. One thing I like about that fake vegan cheddar slice is that it crumbles really easily. So if your recipe calls for shredded cheddar, you have it without having to buy something different. And I think that's great. While I was doing the toppings, I let the dough rise. I did that by soaking a kitchen towel in hot water, wringing it out, putting the towel over the bowl, and then putting the whole thing in the oven. It had been preheating for a few minutes, usually at a really low temperature, and then I turned it off so that inside the oven it feels relatively warm but not super hot. And then I let it rise in that oven with the temperature turned off for 1 hour. I typically only ever make bread when I make king cake, which is for Mardi Gras, and that happens in February or March. So my house is too cold to really rise the bread naturally anywhere else. So I've always stuck it in the oven, but I only preheat the oven for a couple minutes and then turn it off, and then it stays like 80-ish, 90-ish the whole time. So the recipe says to form a ball with a dough bit like 2 inches across, and then stuff the ingredients inside, and then place it in a cast iron skillet or a 9x9 pan, although I'm reading it again, and I think she said a 9x9 is too small or an 8x8 is too small. A 9-inch round cake pan or pie dish is too small for this recipe, so keep that in mind if that's all you have. Maybe make less dough and obviously less toppings. But yeah, that's pretty much the rest of this recipe is making these dough balls. I tried to make sure I had cheese, pepperoni, and a jalapeno in every ball, and then rolling it after you stuff it also kind of helps keep it closed. One thing I noticed when I was doing this is that the gluten in the wheat flour really helped stretch the balls. I'm the kind of person that when I bake, I make things too small. The recipe says, unless there's a cookie cutter involved and I use like the right size cookie cutter, the recipe would say, oh, make the dough into 2-inch balls. And I'm like, no, no, no. I need more cookies than, 12. So I would make them smaller. So I'm pretty sure I made these a lot smaller than the recipe said, which is no big deal. But then I also had a lot more toppings than the recipe said, which could be a big deal. So I don't know if this would work out very well if it were gluten-free, because the gluten in the dough kind of allows the dough to stretch as you're forming it into a ball and as you're sticking your thumb in for the divot for the toppings. And if that was not a factor, I don't think I would have been able to get all my toppings in. You know what I mean? Like it's almost like an elastic food. The gluten lets it stretch, and that elasticity is very important when you have to stuff something into a small space. So I kind of felt bad that this might not work for gluten-free dough. But on the other hand, if you have a lot fewer like quantities of topping, then perhaps you won't need it to stretch that much. So you give it a whirl. Let me know what you find out. I don't mean to pester you, but have you subscribed yet? Please like, share, and subscribe. We're going to let the dough rise a second time, so take that kitchen towel, soak it in hot water, wring it out, pop it in the oven at a very low temperature. Basically, preheat it for like a couple minutes. Stick your hand in. If it feels like summertime, you're good. If it feels like hell, you're not good. And then let it rise in a warm area for 30 minutes. And you have seen that it's risen. So what is happening now? Now we're baking it. Okay, so now you have to bake it for 20 minutes at 350 degrees, and don't put the toppings on at this point. They will come later. So after it had baked in the oven for 20 minutes, you're going to add the toppings. I tried to spread it out so that it was very evenly dispersed with the different things and pretty much scattered around very evenly. So then you're going to tint the whatever container you have it in, tint it with foil, which kind of just means rest foil gently on top, and cook it for 12 to 15 minutes. It turns out that the tinting, in my case, did not make a difference. I didn't think it did anything, so I took it off at some point in the middle of it. I added 3 minutes to see if the top would become browner. 3 more minutes, apparently. That was not enough time. And then I said, it's fine. And one way to test if bread is done is to sort of tap or knock the top of it with your fingernail or the tip of your finger, and if it feels solid, then you're good. So here we are taste testing it, and my husband joined a couple minutes after to taste test it. So it was very good, even though the only vegan thing was the vegan cheese. That's Scott's hand deciding how to pull it apart. The wonderful stretch you get with real cheese wasn't a visual I had with this because of the vegan cheese, but I found it really tasty anyway. The bread was to die for. The herbs in it really, really make a difference, so I do encourage you to do that if you use ready to make dough. Happy eating, everyone.